What I will ask you to learn is only about European civilization, because it thinks that writing a history of France is impossible without the history of Europe. Human beings remain, I'm sorry to say this, savages, not just barbarians. So you have to have a theory. What is the theory? Mankind has gone through many stages of development. So we are almost barbarians. The way we are behaving is almost barbarians. Anyway, these are the three things I'm talking about. What we are now trying to study is a part of European civilization. Let us say there are 10 civilizations, 20 civilizations in the world. One of them is called European civilization, of which France is a part. Okay, but did France overcome its savagery? Honestly, no. You might say we are trying to pretend that it did, but probably it did not. Barbarism, France itself says, now take a look at barbarism. And now there are two maps you see. Look at this way. এভাবে ধরেন উত্তর কোণ থেকে ধরেন উপরের দিকে ধরেন and right প্রথমটা let's begin with this. The barbarian invasions. Look at the legend at the right hand corner. Nations are called legends. That means this explains the map. So how many tribes or how many you would like to call them races of people? Whatever word you use, I will use the tribes. France were one tribe. And there are other tribes. How many tribes are there in the corner? You have the Saxons, you have the Visigoths, you have the Burgundians, Ostrogoths, and you have Huns, you have Vandals. You are now familiar with the English word, vandalism. Vandalism, this is the name of the people. You could now call it European Vandals, because after all they are Europeans. These 7 people, they are collectively called barbarians. By whom? Today's France. Today's French people in their history, for example, Fernand Braudel says they are barbarians. That's why we say the barbarian invasions. Two words are problematic. One is barbarian, the other is invasion. What is the counter narrative? You have to know also the alternative hypothesis and the null hypothesis. This is the alternative hypothesis. What is the null one? Which they are negating. These were migrations of people. Probably you will remember I used a German word last time. It's called Völkerverwanderung. Germans are a strange people. Their words are longer than their dictionary. You see, peoples migrate, they call this word Völkerverwanderung. Believe me, this is one long word without any gap. But if you want to understand them, Völkerverwanderung. Wander means what you call in English wandering. I'm wandering around. Not I wander. That is with O. It is with a without A. I'm wandering around like a vagabond. The folk means what we call in English this one. Folk. So in plural, folka, peoples. Fair means turned, like the French word fair. That is what it is. But it is pronounced not fair, but fair. So Völkerverwanderung, people's great migration, streaming of people. But the word chosen by Mr. Braudel is invasion. They are not the same word. There used to be thought that aliens invaded India. Nowadays they say, no, it was only Völkerverwanderung. It was only immigration. So invasion and immigration is not the same thing. That is one ideological or theoretical point. The barbarian people came to France to civilize it, or how did they themselves get civilized in turn? That is the problem. If you are a barbarian, you are likely to make others barbarian. But in turn, if you get civilized, what is this? So it says the first civilization was, it's an ideological preference. The Italians were the first civilized people. They were called Romans. Their country is Italy, their city is Rome, so they are called Bangladeshis are, let us say, called Dhakaiyas. Instead of Bengalis, you can call yourself Dhakaiya, or we say Caucasian, like Alsatian. There is a breed of dogs called Alsatians. This comes from the French part called Alsace and Lorraine. This was historically a bone of contention between Germany and France, because of the Franco-Prussian War. Germany snatched it away, and the French were looking up to it, and in the First World War they rescued it from them, etc. So this is our story. This invasion from the east, and the paths are drawn. You see, what is the longest path? Who are they? When did they come? They made a breakthrough. You have to now have some put in the examination. I will test you this. What is it? One night they made a breakthrough when the Roman soldiers were sleeping. What year is this? It's the beginning of the 5th century. If you do not know, take it from me again. 406 AD is the beginning of the 5th century. The Huns make a breakthrough and they get inside France. They conquer France. And then what? Their path is traversing, said, how did they come? They cross and they come. And they were divided into 2 wings, you see. The Huns at some point, look at this. They got divided into 2 tribes. One moved this way and then moved northward. The other moved this way and they defeated even the France. You see, they defeated the French. Cross means they defeated them. But then the France also defeated them later. Which year? That's the famous victory. 451. That is about 45 years later. Clovis is still far ahead. Clovis will take his oath in 497. So you have to understand that this is before the Frankish. But Frankish people were already there. They were settling there as agriculturists or as some, tenants of the Roman Empire. So you have to understand the logic of history. The Huns tried to defeat the Romans and themselves become the emperors. But they were beaten back by the locals. One of the locals are the Franks. Huns beaten, the second one. But Hun victory, Hun defeat in 45 minutes. France was saved from the Huns. Who did this job? The Frankish people. Clovis's some forefathers did it. That is why Frankish people started to rule that northern area. But gradually they had to defeat others also to become the whole king of whole France. This is the beginning of France's history. Then take a look at another. Who were the Visigoths? Visigoths means Western Goths. And what is the other? Ostrogoths. You say there are 2 Gothics. Now in Paris there is the famous, what you call on the mountain, there is the church. What is the architectural style? Gothic. But what is Gothic? You have to understand from here. One of the barbarian people are called the Goths. And so anything they do is called Gothic. Their architectural style, their storytelling, people like ভূতের গল্প পছন্দ করে লোকে, এগুলো গথিক বলি আমরা। So the Goths were of 2 varieties. One is called Ostrogoth, the other is called Visigoth. Have your common sense here. You have to, if a little bit of Latin will help you better to understand French, like a little bit of Sanskrit helps to understand Bengali. So the Visigoths got settled in France where the present-day Toulouse is situated. Toulouse de Lautrec, that is that area. What is called southwestern France was settled by the Visigoths. They had to be ousted by the Franks in order to build modern France. That's the story. You see, one picture tells the story of 20 books. It gives you a summary of the movement of barbarian invasions. 7 people, there are other peoples also, but this is a summary only. You see, where did they start? From Eastern Europe. And they traverses, this sea is called Adriatic Sea. And where is Bosnia? They cross Bosnia and they go through Croatia, Serbia, Croatia, Macedonia, Dalmatia, and they come to Italy. And they traverse Italy. They come to the south of Italy and they move across the Mediterranean. And from there, they cross the Alps and they go to the southern France. And through southern France, they go to Spain. Today's Spain. So this is the movement of another people. Where is the other 3rd people? The Burgundians. You see, where are they? They are a short people like the Franks. That is Burgundy. They were to the south of today Paris and to the east in the area called Jura Mountain, the border of Switzerland and France, and the border of Italy, Switzerland and France. This was the area dominated by the Burgundians at that time and also now. So they kept moving towards a little bit western and southwestern. You see, look at the arrow, broken arrow. That is the Burgundians. And then the Ostrogoths, means Eastern Goths. They are a branch of the Gothic people. Where were the Ostrogoths? You see, a little bit north of Italy, on the north of a place called Ravenna, they were crossing their path with the Huns. That means they had battles with the Huns. They crossed them and the Huns crossed their path. So people sometimes conflict, struggle over the same land. So another group. The next is Saxons. You see who are the Saxons? Those who are now settled in England. Anglo-Saxons we call them. They are the mixture of two peoples, Angles and Saxons. Where is Saxon now? It is actually in Germany today. Eastern Germany or northern Germany is called Saxon, which later on was called Prussia, now called Germany. Historically, all of Germany was not Germany. Only one part was Germany. To the east of the Burgundian dominance. That was the German people. They were called Alemans later, Almani, and so on and so forth. You see, Saxons were touching on France only. They went to England and they remained in Germany. So this story has to be told in terms of civilization. Now we are talking about the barbarians, but our theoretical preference is civilization. France has become a civilization, did it? What is the civilizing influence? Everybody admits that it is the Roman Empire. But you have to also admit another fact. Roman Empire got divided in the 4th century. When these invasions are taking place, Roman civilization was already divided between two Roman empires, Western Roman and Eastern Roman. The capital of Western Roman is Rome. What was the capital of Eastern Roman Empire? Constantinople. You see, in the map, find the place Constantinople. What does it mean? Elaborate the meaning of the word Constantinople. City. Of course, polis means city. Constantinopolis, that is the full name. You see. For example, today in Italy there is a city called Naples. What does this mean? And its adjective is Neapolitan. How is this possible? Think about this. I am a Napolesian, you cannot say this. You have to say I am a Neapolitan. Like you say, I am a metropolitan. And what does metro mean? Metropolis means mother city. Yeah. Right. Ummul Bilad, mother of the city. Metropolitan মানে metropolis সাথে জড়িত। এই জন্য Neapolitan মানে Neapolis এর সাথে যুক্ত। Neapolis কে সংক্ষেপে Naples বলে। অন্ধ্র এই শহরের নাম কি যেটার আসল জায়গা? Constantinopolis. কনস্টান্টিনের শহর। City of Constantine. এই যে Constantine police দুইটাকে যোগ করেন তখন হবে কি Constantinopolis হ্যাঁ এটাকে সংক্ষেপে এখন ইংরেজিতে করছি কি বদলাই ফেলছে Constantinople এটার এখন আসল নাম কি ইস্তানবুল Constantinople জিনিসটা কি ছিল it was the capital of the second Roman Empire or alternatively known as Eastern Roman Empire. It was from that place that Russia was civilized. And the Bible that they used, the language they used was Greek. And in Rome, the language they used was Latin. এটাকে Latin Europe বলে, ওটাকে Greek Europe বলে। এই সমস্ত কথা জানতে হবে আপনাকে। ওটাকে বলে Greek Orthodox Church, এটাকে বলে Roman Catholic Church. Orthodox, this is another Greek word. Ortho means straight, dox মানে opinion. Word, ortho opinion. গ্রিক ভাষাতে শব্দটি দোক্সাকে অর্থ মানে স্ট্রেট এখন বলো না অর্থোগ্রাফি এটা আমি লিখলাম কত সুন্দর করে লিখবেন এগুলো অর্থোগ্রাফি স্ট্রেট রাইটিং দিস ইজ দ্য ফার্স্ট ওয়েভ অফ বারবারিয়ান ইনভেশন টু ফ্রান্স ফ্রান্সকে দেখলে মনে হবে একটা ফানেলের ছোট সাইড আছে না ফানেল চিনেন তো আমরা এগুলো তো এই যে পান পাত্র থাকে না আমাদের এরকম পান পাত্র আমি আঁকতে জানি না ভালো ফ্রান্স এটা হচ্ছে ইউরোপ the smaller end থাকে এটা হচ্ছে এশিয়া Europe does not exist. It is only an extension of Asia. Europe একটা যোজক মাত্র। এদিকে সমুদ্র, ওদিকে সমুদ্র, তিন দিকে সমুদ্র, it's a peninsula. আর পূর্ব দিকে কি এশিয়া, বিরাট এশিয়া। এবং ওই দিক থেকে ইনভেশন আসছে। আপনি যে সাদা অংশ দেখছেন এটা ল্যান্ড। আর এই রঙিন অংশগুলো, গ্রে অংশগুলো সমুদ্র। So you take a look at this. What is Europe? Europe is an isthmus. Europe is an extension. আমি বলতে the narrow end of the funnel. It was not European civilization or Africa or Asia. Mediterranean means a sea between Africa, Europe and Asia. Yes, actually on this civilization, Mr. Fernand Braudel wrote his PhD dissertation in 1949. That was the seminal thesis. Mediterranean and the Mediterranean in the age of Philip II of Spain. That is the name of his book. Yes, he says. Fernand Braudel was born in 1902 in a place called Luméville, northwestern Lorraine, France. In 1984, he was elected to the Académie Française. Fernand Braudel died in Paris in 1985. So the first invasions took place, let us say, in the 5th century, in the 6th, 7th centuries, etc. Then come the others. In the 9th and 10th century, this is called later barbarian invasions. These are still barbarians, but they came from a different place and they conquered Europe. Look at this, where did they come from? Where are they coming from today? You see, look at this, origin of two black, who are these people? One of them was Vikings. So who are the Vikings? You see, the place from which the Vikings are originating, this place is where? Today, where this place is Sweden. It is the Scandinavia from where they are coming. It's exactly the place from where they move this way. This black arrow is the line of movement of Vikings. That means, in other words, they originated in northern Europe, very cold region, they started to come south. In the 9th and 10th centuries, they conquered Europe from here, you see. And what is the other? Listen, Hungarians. You see, the Hungarians were also great conquerors from Eastern Europe, and they were stopped by the Germans. So what is the function of Germany? To stop Eastern people from entering France. So Germany was their cousin one time, but they themselves wanted to conquer France. So in other words, today's Europe is formed not by geography, but by war. The borderlines of Europe are determined by successive waves of war. That is the historical message. And these wars are called, I told you in the very beginning, even if people become civilized, they need not stop wars. But this book writer tried to say that only barbarians made war. We are civilized, we don't make war. Hungarianরা দেখেন এই যে সাদা তীরটা দুই মাসে কত লাগে তারা বিভক্ত হয়েছে. This is a rough approximation. The Hungarians moved from east depth of eastern. Hungarian কি ওই হুনদের বংশধর দেখেন. হুনরা যে পথে আসছে তারা সে পথে আসছে. এদের হলো later barbarians. As late ইউরোপ তখন ইসলাম ধর্ম প্রচার শুরু হয়েছে আরবে. স্পেনে ইসলাম ধর্ম প্রতিষ্ঠা করে তারা মুসলিম সাম্রাজ্য তৈরি করেছে. বাগদাদে খলিফা হারুন রশিদ রাজত্ব করছে কখন? 8ম সেঞ্চুরিতে। সেই সময় ইউরোপে বারবারিজম চলছে। এবং তখন এরপরে এই 2 সেঞ্চুরির নাম কি জানেন? You don't know. They are called dark ages. Dark ages. অন্ধকার যুগ। আচ্ছা, অন্ধকার যুগ কেন বলছে পরে? এবং তা থেকে আলো কিন্তু বলে কখন? 11শ শতাব্দীতে। This is the summary of the other chapter that I have not read you. আমরা এখন যখন বইতে খুলবো তখন দেখবেন যে in the 9th and 10th centuries what happened in Europe. Europe was invaded by some northern tribes. One of them is called the Vikings. In modern terms, they are the Scandinavians. Scandinavians. That means Norwegians, Danish, and Swedish. Also, you may include Icelandic people.
And also Finland.
Finland is not quite. I will talk about that. Finlandese are more like Hungarians. How do you know that? Their language. Finnish language does not belong to the Icelandic group or the Swedish group. This is the language of the Indo-Aryan group called the Anglo-Saxon group. But Finnish language, Turkish language, and Hungarian language, they belong to Altai group. We'll talk about that some other time. So this is the story. So what I try to give you through this map, it tells you volumes. The two stories of barbarian invasion in Europe. One in the 4th, 5th, 6th centuries. In fact, Carolingian, Merovingian, these are all barbarics. Because the Franks were barbarics in that sense. And now the next barbarics are the Scandinavians or Vikings, Hungarians or later the Huns, and Arabs, or we can call them part Africans, part Arabs. They were making this approachment. 9th and 10th century, these are called dark ages. But after 11th and 12th century, they say Europe is experiencing a renaissance, enlightenment. So the other historian I would mention along with this is another man. He's Belgian, but he also writes in French. Read this name. Henri Pirenne. This is Belgium. This is Belgium. You know, they are old French dynasties. This man is Alsatian, this man is Belgian, but they are all called French writers. I mean, these are the three big historians that talk about Europe's formation in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th centuries. This is the map I took from this book. It is from the book's middle, page 310 and 311. This pages. Once you come across this book somewhere, you will find this map. Christianity. Christianity, ethic ki holo? Humanism, and scientific thought. এটা পরে আলোচনা আমরা করব। ইউরোপে এই ফ্রিডমের মধ্যে তারা নাম দিয়েছে ফ্রান্সের সবচেয়ে ভালো শব্দ কি? লিবার্টি। লিবার্টি, এগালিতে, ফ্রাটার্নিতে, three slogans of the French Revolution. They were from the very beginning there. France means liberty. But one more thing is necessary, called stability. Europe was in the beginning not stable. So a border, a state, a nation has to be made stabilized. Then you can enjoy your liberty. Economic, economic economic industrialization. Industrialization of France and industrialization of England and other Europe. How Europe becomes so dominant in the world? Because of industrialization and bracketable and colonization of the third world. Conquest of America, conquest of Canada. Why France is in Martinique? Martinique why Guadeloupe, French Guyana, Reunion or Papua New Guinea? Why there are so many French colonies? Why France was in Vietnam? Why France is in Pondicherry or in Hooghly? England colonization. This is also called modernization. Europe and France. Until France, France 9. France is a part of Europe, or it is becoming part of the European Union. এই প্রশ্নগুলো আমরা আলোচনা করব। প্রথমে তিনটা আলোচনা করলে আপনার ফ্রেঞ্চের ইতিহাস হয়ে যাবে। The thematic distribution is this. So the first thing that I said, I will say this again. Civilization, industrialization, does it make us free of the inherent savagery and barbarism? There is a history of progress in mankind. Nobody can deny the progress of time. Generations change every 25 years. My civilization, does it get rid of savagery or it puts it under the rug? যখন কার্পেট তুলে ফেলবে ওটা স্যারেজ দেখা যায়। সুরাইয়া পড়ে আমার লেখা বুঝতে পারছেন না?
Histoire, civilisé ou pas, ils sont capables de même entraînement collectif des mêmes
Führer. দেখি আমি লিসবন ট্রান্সলেট করে কি বলতে চাচ্ছেন সে que ils soient civilisés ou pas, whether they are civilized or not. If they are not civilized, no question. Even if they are civilized, it makes no difference. So
capable of same collective entertainment and same.
এখানে ভুল বললেন স্যার, এর মানে এন্টারটেইনমেন্ট না, entraînement,
training,
baggage, entraînement পিছনে যেটা আপনি টানে নিয়ে যান বোঝা, এটা আরো মিনিং আছে। এটা এন্টারটেইনমেন্ট, entraînement। আচ্ছা আসবে কালেক্টিভ, কালেক্টিভলি তারা এটাকে বলে কি, ধরেন এটা মানে মিসচিফ, কালেক্টিভ তারা ধ্বংসযোগ্য করতে পারে। ধরেন একটা বাহিনী যাওয়ার সময় পিছনে সব ধুলো উড়িয়ে যায় না, তারা পিছনে সব ধ্বংসস্তূপ রেখে যায় না, এরকম কিছু আর কি। দ্য ম্যান, এখন এগুলো যে কঠিন ফিলোসফিক্যাল শব্দ, এটা দেখা কি সুগার মানে কি দাঁড়াচ্ছে, অর্থাৎ মানুষ সভ্য হোক বা না হোক, এই মানে হচ্ছে মানুষ। এখানে আমরা আমরা নারী পুরুষ দুইটাকে একটা দিয়ে পুরুষ দিয়ে প্রকাশ করি, পড়াশোনা they are civilized or not. People are capable of the same collective enthusiasms, and the same passions. এটা সঠিক অনুবাদ নয়, মানে ফিউরার মানে প্যাশন শুধু নয়, এটার বাংলা হচ্ছে অযৌক্তিক। মানুষ কালেকটিভলি হেন অন্যায় না ইয়ে করতে পারে না, সভ্য হোক না, উদাহরণ হচ্ছে কি যুদ্ধ। একটা গত সপ্তাহে আপনারা পড়েছেন এই বইতে, ফ্রাঙ্কো প্রুশিয়ান যুদ্ধে ফ্রান্সকে পরাস্ত করে জার্মানি। কারণ জার্মান অফিসারদের কলারের মধ্যে একটা আলাদা রিবন লাগানো হয়েছে, এটার নাম ফ্রেঞ্চ ব্লাড। ইয়েস, ফ্রাঞ্জোসিশে ব্লুট জার্মান ভাষায় বলে ফ্রেঞ্চ ব্লাড। আদার পিপল আর সো রিভেঞ্জফুল। যুদ্ধ হয়, রেশিয়াল হেট্রেড ইজ ভেরি কমন। এইটা হচ্ছে সেইটা অনখাইন্য against the enthusiasm লিখলে চলবে না। মানে what Dhaka is trying to say is that people are capable of same illogicalities. এই যে ফিউরন মানে আর কি নিতে হতে ফারবা গায়ে জর্মসের মতো করে আর কি। অর্থাৎ মানুষ সভ্য হলেও তার ভিতরে সেই প্যাশন বন্ধ হয় না। সেই প্যাশনটাকে ফ্রয়েডের নাম দিয়েছে আনকনশাস প্যাশন। সিভিলিজিরুকা বলছে ils sont capables de même entraînement collectif of the same entrainment collectively. সেই collective enthusiasm মানে কি? lack of reason. যুক্তি থাকে না। মানুষ যে গর্ব করেছে দিস রেশনাল অ্যানিমাল, এর যে ভুয়া কথা করতে বিষয় থাকে। Man is not a reason. Monkey is a man that desiring animal. This is the basic theory. This theory itself was created in the 19th century. In English, sometimes written with S. For example, in this book, American English uses a Z, and British English uses an S. So it's like the French S. You will say civilisation. So three things: savagery, barbarism, and civilization. This is what I call theory. Theory means, what does theory mean? To see. Theo means to see. Theory means see. In Bengali we say the right word, darshan, darshana, to see. So theory is this. It's a very simple stylistic theory. I do not say that it is the truth, but it's a frame within which to look at human development. In the beginning, mankind lived in jungles, lived in caves. We see French people were no exception. Whether they migrated from Africa or from Eastern Europe doesn't matter. They lived in the present-day land of France in savage conditions. We will find them. Then the next is called barbarism. That means they were coming from a civilization where they were using iron. I'm giving you one hint. They were killing each other and they were conquering others then as if without law. Barbarism implies a lawlessness. What are the people who invaded France at the beginning of the first millennium? Let's call them first millennium. We are talking the last 2,000 years. So the first millennium is the first 1,000, and second millennium is the second 1,000. So these two maps belong to the first millennium. One earlier, the other later. We call the later barbarian invasions, that is on the second half, and the first one is the early barbarian invasion. Take a look. They are maps of France. Where were the France? With that arrow. This is the Frankish arrow, let's say. This one, this is Frankish. Where are they? Where is today? Take a look at this. Where today there is Paris. They are divided as if moving into as a two arrows. You see. That means the Franks were very non-dominant. Where did they come from? Probably from Germany. Look here in my map. This arrow. Where today is Paris? That was the Frankish. In the first read the different. These are called legends at this corner. You are sure? Legend. Where is the Visigoths? This is the Visigoth line. You see, take this. And then a dark head. The arrow with a dark head and a broken tail is the Visigoths. Where did they come? Look at this. How did they move? The Visigoths. Yes, they moved from, you said they came from Eastern Europe. They traversed the Adriatic coast. Where is Yugoslavia today? This is the Adriatic coast. You have to see this. Yeah, this is. They started from here, they come here, and you see, they come through Italy and they cross Italy and they come to up to the way of Spain. This is called, I'm again after Liki, Perna, Bro, there. As I told you, he is a premier historian of France. He died in he was born in 1902 and died in 1985. So he had a ripe old age of 83 years when he died. He is the founder of one of the founders, that I would say, of the French currently dominant school, which is known as the Annales School. That is the name of the journal that they edited collectively. And you will find two other historians' names mentioned. One is called Marc Bloch. That is one of his masters. Then you will find another man's name mentioned here, Lucien Febvre. Yeah, this is before him. They are his collaborators in this journal. Actually, these two gentlemen founded this journal in 1920s, and Mr. Febvre became their successor. He became a member of the Académie Française in 1984. Member of Académie Française. Just he was elected to this, this elected position in 1984. Then 1 year later he died. So at his death, this book remained unfinished. Identity of France, L'identité de la France. This one he was commissioned by the French government to write in 1963. Gramme de civilisation. এইটা 1963 সনে লেখা। কিন্তু এখন যে এডিশনে কিন্তু দেখছি এটার পুনর্নির্মাণ করে আবার রিপ্রিন্ট হয়েছে 1990 or around that time. Anyway, this is bibliographic material. I can talk to you that at the break. আসলে হচ্ছে this barbarism civilization এই কথাটা আমি বোঝানোর চেষ্টা করছি। What is the chief question? How did France become civilized? How the French people became civilized people? এটা হচ্ছে প্রথম প্রশ্ন। এখানে উত্তর হচ্ছে the France themselves were a pre-civilized people. According to their own theory, the French are saying that we were children of the barbarians. Now the natural question is, how did you overcome that barbarianism? How did you become civilized? They said we were taught by the Romans. এটা সহজ উত্তর। তো রোমানসদের সম্পর্কে একটু গল্প বলতে হয়, না বলতে গল্প হবে না। Romans themselves were divided. Roman civilization was founded in the 8th century before Christ, 753 day, তাদের typical day. Romulus and Romulus নামে দুই ভাই এই শহর প্রতিষ্ঠা করেন ইত্যাদি। We are talking about a period 400 years after Christ. তার মধ্যে 1000 বছর পার হয়ে গেছে। Then Roman Empire was divided between two brothers, Western and Eastern. এর অনেক গল্প আছে। Eastern and capital গুলো দেখাচ্ছি এই ম্যাপে, কনস্টান্টিনোপল যেটা আধুনিক তুর্কিতে। তার পূর্ব দিকটা তারা নিয়ন্ত্রণ করেছে আড্রিয়াটিক পর্যন্ত। আর পশ্চিম অংশটা দেখেন ইতালি কোথায়? আপনি দেখেন কনস্টান্টিনোপল থেকে রোমের দূরত্ব অনেক দূর। রোম কোথায়? কনস্টান্টিনোপল দেখেন। এইটাকে বলে ওয়েস্টার্ন, এটাকে বলে ইস্টার্ন। আচ্ছা, যে গড যারা ইস্ট থেকে আসে তাদেরকে বলে অস্ট্রোগথ, যারা ওয়েস্টার্ন গড তাদেরকে বলে ভিসিগথ। স্যাক্সন, হুন, ভ্যান্ডাল এক লাইনে, আর এখানে ফ্রান্স, ভিসিগথ, বুরগুন্ডিয়ান, অস্ট্রোগথ। তাহলে ফ্রান্স এন্ড বুরগুন্ডিয়ান এটা এখানে রুমের মধ্যে দেখতে পাচ্ছেন। আর ভিসিগথ এন্ড অস্ট্রোগথ দুই গথ, তাহলে 7 হয়ে গেল। আর ওখানে স্যাক্সন, হুন এবং ভ্যান্ডালস, এই 7টা জাতির লোকজন কোন সময় আসে, কোন পথ ধরে আসে সবাইকে দেখিয়ে দিচ্ছি আপনাকে। হুনদের পথ অনেক দীর্ঘ, তারা অনেক দূর পূর্ব থেকে আসছে, তারা প্রায় পূর্ব রাশিয়া থেকে আসছে। দিস ইজ দ্য স্টোরি। ভ্যান্ডালদের কিংডমটা দেখেন এখন। ভ্যান্ডালরা কথা তারা স্পেন থেকে শুরু করে আক্রমণ করতে আসিল। এই যে কার্তেজ জায়গাটা কোথায়? এটা ভ্যান্ডালরা আসে। কার্তেজ হচ্ছে আধুনিক টিউনিশিয়া, নর্থ আফ্রিকা। এটা তো এই ল্যান্ডটা তো নর্থ আফ্রিকা। এখানে যে ভ্যান্ডাল কিংডম আপনাদের নোটিস দেওয়ার জন্য অনেক দূরে আছে আলেকজান্ড্রিয়া থেকে। Where is Alexandria today? In Egypt. তাহলে আপনি দেখেন এখন যে দ্বন্দ্বটা হচ্ছে পশ্চিম ইউরোপের সাথে উত্তর আফ্রিকা বা মিডল ইস্টে, তার একটা পটভূমি দেখা দেখতে পাচ্ছি। What do we need to know about French history? 1. Geography and politics. What do we do to know? Politics বলতে কি বোঝায়? ফরাসিরা বলতো শব্দটা ফ্রিডম। এমনকি ফ্রাঙ্কিশ নামটার অর্থ এখন তারা করছে ফ্রি পিপল। তারপরে কি? What is the role of geography? আমি একটু করে বলে দিলাম। Europe is only an extension of Asia. But how the border of Europe was determined is the history of experience of wars, খ্রিস্টানদের বিরুদ্ধে যে বিদ্রোহ করলো এটার নাম হিউম্যানিজম। আমাদের দেশে এটাকে ধর্ম নিরপেক্ষতা বলা হয়, আমাদের এখানে সেকুলারিজম বলা হয়। ফরাসি ভাষায় বলে লেইসিতে, লাইক অ্যাজ অপোজ টু ক্লেরিক অ্যান্ড দেন সায়েন্টিফিক থট। এটা আমরা আলোচনা ফ্রান্সের ইতিহাসের আধুনিক যুগের সূত্রপাত হবে। সিভিলাইজেশন মিনস কালকেটিভ স্যাভেজারি অলসো। আমার বক্তব্য হচ্ছে একটা সিম্পল প্রশ্ন করি, ডিড দ্য ফ্রেঞ্চ পিপল বিকাম সিভিলাইজড আফটার অল দিস ইয়ার্স? তাহলে হিউম্যানিজম আমাদের কিছু বলেছে? হিউম্যানিজম, নাথিং হ্যাজ বিন চেঞ্জ বাই হিউম্যানিজম। হোয়াট ইজ হিউম্যানিজম? ইজ অ্যানাদার ফাসাদ। মুখে একটা মুখোশ করছে। অ্যানাদার সায়েন্টিফিক থট ডিড নট মেক ইউ এনি মোর রেশনাল। তাহলে মানুষ যে কি প্রাণী এটা বোঝার জন্য দ্য বেস্ট গাইড টু ম্যানকাইন্ড ফিলোসফি ইজ দ্য ম্যান কল্ড ফ্রয়েড। So anyway, we'll talk about this later. And what is the third one left in the list? Arabs. Because this is the great complex of Mr. Brother. Arabs invading us. Nonsense. The Arabs are inferior people, but they did. Why? Because Islam was expanding on two sides, through Spain and through Turkey. And through Turkey they invaded, and before that, through the Mediterranean they came to Sicily, the southern island in Italy. Italy has two Sicilies, the southern, and then in the sea there is another island called Sardinia, and a little bit above is the little island of Corsica. Corsica was formerly Italian, later on it was ceded to France, and Napoleon was born in Corsica, in that little island. I'm talking about Sicily. Where is Sicily? Yeah, you see, this is Sicily. You see all these Arab arrows are going there. Arabs were moving from where? From Carthage. That is from Tunisia, Tunis, or from Egypt, or from Spain. Arabs were moving from many different directions. Yes. The Vikings were moving through many different ways. You see, Vikings were moving not only there, they conquered whole of Western Europe. They moved to England, and they moved also through the Mediterranean. The Vikings were the dominant force in the 9th and 10th centuries. You see their dominance. The Vikings even claimed that they went to North America. There is a debate, you know. The Vikings discovered America long before Columbus did. That's a different story. It is these Vikings. Vikings are still there, and they are very strong. And so Vikings, Hungarians, and the Arabs, these are the three forces of the 8th and 9th centuries. And you see, very interestingly, Arabs are called barbarians. The Arabs were at that time more civilized than the Romans. They defeated. You see the first map, you see there is the Sassanid kingdom. Look at the first panel. Where is the Sassanid? Who are the Sassanids? Sassanids. Sassanids, madam, they are your trace. They are Aryans. They are the Persians. ইরানীদেরকে সাসানিদ বলা হতো তখন। Iranian dynasty was called Sassanian dynasty before Islam. Islam took Iraq was ruled by them. After the spread of Islam, Iraq was made into an Arabian territory. It was conquered from Iran. এবং এখনো পর্যন্ত শিয়া ধর্মের সবচেয়ে বড় কেন্দ্র ইরাকি। Men furor, men on কেন? Civilization or not, you are capable of the same enthusiasm, same mischiefs, same what you might call them, same barbarisms. The question is, does civilization change anything? We have listened to the mythology that it does. A mythology name progress. So our big question is there progress in history? If so, in what sense? For example, have human beings become kinder, more merciful?
No.
It is the question. They have become more ethical? These are the questions. So three things I would like to emphasize. First, one thing at a time. First thing, Europe or France has become stable. The question is first stability and liberty. So this long period of French history, let us say, I will say from 5th century to let's say 13th century. France is acquiring an identity. Stability but not getting an identity. Words may be many, but we are trying to head at the same meaning. For example, if you fix your identity, it means you fix your borders. this is me. I have copyright over my body. Don't touch me. You have to pay a price. So every country determines its territory. So first question is, how are the borders of France, frontiers of France are determined? Before that, we have to also ask another question, how are the borders of Europe determined? Because Europe is a continuum with Asia. There is no natural boundary, except that there are some mountains, there are some rivers, that is nature. Europe is an extension of Asia. But then how does Europe get an identity separate from Asia? Asian barbarian. For example, Turkey has been applying for entry into the European Union for the last 50 years. Turkey is still kept. They are waiting for it. Why? The Turks are barbarians. That is the implied theory. So let's go and see some of the words of this gentleman. The history of Europe, Brodel writes, has everywhere been marked by the stubborn growth of private liberties, franchises or privileges limited to certain groups, peoples. The word is liberties. Now in English, the word liberties has many meanings. To take your liberties means you have become a libertarian. And good thing is, Europe never said, for example, we say human rights. Some NGO people without understanding it sometimes say human right. It is a word always in the program, rights. The word right has so many meanings. My right side, it is right to do this, go right. And rights means things that you deserve legally or ethically, or it is only logical that you get this thing. That is called also right. They all have a kind of connection with each other. One is used as a metaphor for another, but slightly displacing. That is a linguistic law. The word right in French, the word is droit. That droit, human rights. And droit is also two as gauche or droit, bam or down, the same. Why this metaphorical relationship? Very interesting. But the word they use in Latin is libertas, in singular. This is the origin, because the root word is liber, free. The question is this, the French people traditionally like their liberty. What does liberty mean? Not liberty of one individual here. This is liberty of a group. Now the question is, how big is this group? Is it a tribe or a nation? Or a race? Or a small clan? This is, or a family or a group? He says that often these liberties conflicted with each other or were mutually exclusive. If suppose I draw, this is my area, don't come here. Another person says, this is my area. So how about this? A and B. And no man's land or both man's land is the area of conflict. So then question is, clearly these liberties could exist only. These liberties which conflicted with each other could exist only when Western Europe as such had taken shape and become relatively stable. Undefended or strife-torn, it could afford no such luxury. Liberty and stability were inseparable. Suppose you claim your liberty, but you cannot defend this area. Somebody else is also taking liberty. So therefore one precondition for enjoying liberty would be an area not overlapping with each other. So you can say, so one of the preconditions of liberty is acquiring stability. That's why Fernand Brodel proposes that, let me tell you how liberty was guaranteed by first acquiring stability. How does Europe take shape? 5th to 13th century, that's what I say. From 5th century, Europe and implicitly France takes shape. This is the main thing. All we have studied so far, before the 5th century, we have studied about 1000 years. 5 centuries before the Christian era, 5 centuries after. We call this the era of Celtic people, Gaulish, Gallo-Romans, and so on. Now we are proceeding forward. Europe is being formed after the 5th century, which is incidentally after the fall of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire started to fall around the year 476 That's what we traditionally like. After that, what happens? A new Europe is being born, which is not Roman Europe as such. That means some non-Roman and Roman Europe is getting mixed up. Another year I will mention here is this, 395 AD. This is the end of the 4th century. We know, you have seen what happened this year and compare this with this. What is the difference between these 2 dates? 10 years or 11 years? The first one I discussed already, the Hun victory. They crossed, they made a breakthrough and they continued it, come to Western Europe. They came almost to the frontier of Atlantic. They broke through the boundary of France and Germany, let's call it that way. So they conquered almost half of France, but they were defeated later. Now the question, that is why the Carolingian dynasty came into power, because they were able to defeat the Huns, so that gave them the legitimacy. And one of them, Clovis, actually is the 3rd generation Carolingian, he is not the 1st generation. So here comes 395, 10 years before. What happened? The Roman Empire was broken that year into 2 parts, Eastern and Western. One centered on Constantinople, the other is gone. So the things are going on simultaneously. 395 is the year when the emperor, his name is Theodosius, yeah, that is his name. Theodosius died that year. I read the sentence from this book. It all began with the division of the Roman Empire, confirmed but not caused when it was partitioned on the death of Theodosius in the year 395 AD. Theo, Do or D, and Do. Zeus, Emperor Theodosius dies this year. And after his death, on the question of what you call it, succession, inheritance, the empire was divided. One Eastern, another Western. Rome is called Western and Constantinople is Eastern. And you will see this pattern will repeat after the death of Charlemagne. You will see that empire will be again divided. Who is Charlemagne? His empire lasted very little. His grandfather defeated the Arabs, one of those Arab invasions. You have to remember this year, 732 AD. Just remember this, France's border, 732 AD. Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel, stops the Arabs from coming over to the Pyrenees up to France. So that is the defeat. Defeat of the Arabs. So this is, and what was this? 406, that was victory. But he was defeated on 451 AD. You see, the power which can control the border becomes legitimate rulers. Those who defeated the Huns, they became the owner of the Frankish kingdom. And that is how that was they took the name of Merovingian. You will see this. And then we will see around the middle of the 8th century, there was a new dynasty coming in. Because of their legitimacy, what is the legitimacy? They defeated the Arabs. That's why I said the later invasions, 3 forces I saw. Arabs invading from the south and from the east. And what the Hungarians coming from one side, the Scandinavians coming from another side. So the story here is the legitimacy of rulership over France was bestowed by their victory at a place called Poitiers. This is the famous Poitiers. These are only outlines. Now a new dynasty is changed. That dynasty was very short-lived. Charlemagne enthroned himself. His empire was built on the year 800. You will see here. After this, 800 AD, Charlemagne is coronated. And he dies in 1814 AD. When a big monarch dies, Charles dies. You see. Theodosius dies in 395 with the Roman Emperor. Roman Empire is divided. And Charlemagne dies and his children, not immediately, but his grandchildren divide that inheritance. So Western Francia becomes France, Eastern Francia becomes Germany. That's why I said that it is not necessary for you to remember the dates. What you need is the logic. How it is proceeding, which one is after what. Because the big empire is now broken into small units. Shalman's empire was only an empire in name. It was big enough because it included Italy also. But actually, its power was divided among its inheritors in the third generation. Shalman has only probably one son, so there was no division. But then there were multiple sons, and they divided. We repeat the same history in the Mughal Empire also. All of the new emperors were trying to compete with their brothers. For example, the greatest well-known story is Shah Jahan's children, Dara Shukru, Shah Shuja, Alamgir ulfe Aurangzeb, and Murad. The four brothers were from Murad was in Gujarat, Aurangzeb was in Deccan, and Shuja was in Bengal, and in Delhi was Dara Shukru. And Dara Shukru was favorite of Shah Jahan. What Aurangzeb does, Shah Shuja declared himself emperor. Murad declared himself emperor. Aurangzeb was cunning. He did not declare himself emperor. He came to Delhi and he arrested his father. And he killed his elder brother. So he became. He was called Zinda Pir. He was a Pir. Yeah, only killing makes you a Pir, by the way. If you don't know, only a murderer becomes the emperor. What is it? Europe takes shape 5th to 13th century. 13th century কেন? আপনারা ক্রুসেডের নাম শুনেছেন? ক্রুসেড এই যুগের মধ্যেই পড়ে। এইটার কত পরে? এইটা এদের কত হয়েছে? আরেকটু পরে 476 AD। এইটা থেকে এটা দূরত্ব কত? 1000 বছর। পশ্চিম রোমান সাম্রাজ্যের পতন হয়েছে 476 75 আর পূর্ব রোমান সাম্রাজ্যের পতন হয়েছে 1453 কার হাতে পতন হলো? তুর্কিদের হাতে, অটোমান সাম্রাজ্যের হাতে। এবং রেনেসাঁস মানে হলো পুনর্জন্ম, rebirth of what? Greek learning, therefore of humanism. ওই যে বললাম Christianity, humanism comes as a critique of his Christianity that took place there. কাজে রোমান সাম্রাজ্যের পতন কথা যখন বলেন একটা কথা মনে রাখবেন, পশ্চিমা রোমান সাম্রাজ্যের কথা, ওই ওইটা পার্স অক্সিডেন্টালিস। আর এটা হলো এই পার্টের নাম কি? পার্স ওরিয়েন্টালিস। এখন কিভাবে সীমান্তর হলো? In the northeast of Europe, ইউরোপের উত্তরে এবং পূর্ব কোণায়, যেখানে ওই যে আমরা দেখলাম ডেনমার্কের উত্তরে থাকি, ওই যে ভাইকিংরা আছে, তারা কি করলো? এখানে দুটো শব্দ দিতে, double lines of the Rhine and the Danube could not resist the pressure of the barbarians, fleeing from the Huns. এখানে একটা আমাকে একজনকে তাড়াচ্ছে, আমাদের বারবারিয়া যাদের বলছি তাদেরকে তাড়াচ্ছে হুনরা, আবার এই বারবারিয়ানরা সব ফ্রান্সদেরকে তাড়াচ্ছে। এটার মধ্যে একটা শব্দ লাইন শব্দের অর্থ তুমি জানেন না, কিন্তু লাইনস, ডাবল লাইনস অফ বলে ডাবল লাইনস অফ Rhine, the Rhine and the Danube. LIMES এটা শব্দ, এর মানে কেউ মধ্যে এই শব্দ দেখেছেন? ডিকশনারিতে দেখবেন, মানে কি আপনার লিমিট কথাটা বুঝেছেন? তাতে জানেন ওই লাইনের থেকে ইএস বাদ দিলে কি থাকে? লিম থাকে, ওটা থেকে লিমিট তৈরি হয়েছে। এটা লিমস হবে, আমি এগুলো ইংরেজিতে লাইন উচ্চার করছি। এখানে আর শব্দ আছে লিমিনাল, মানে বর্ডার। দুইটা কথা লিমিনালিটি, সোসিওলজি বলে লিমিনালিটির মুখোমুখি হবে। এটা হচ্ছে সেই ডাবল লাইন উইথ দ্য ডাবল বর্ডার্স। In the northeast, the double lines of the Rhine and the Danube could not resist the pressure of the barbarians fleeing from the Huns. In 405, Radagaisus led a barbarian army into Italy as far as Tuscany. Soon afterwards, it's a famous date, which I will put it 406 December রাতে, গল্পটা হচ্ছে এরকম। On the night of 31st of December 406, a horde of barbarian peoples crossed the frozen Rhine near the place as Germany called Mainz and overcame the Gallic provinces. Gallic province is a province কমাতে আসে নাই। কার প্রভিন্স? রোমের প্রভিন্স। রোমের কোন প্রভিন্স? গল একটা প্রভিন্স ছিল না, 17টা প্রভিন্স ছিল, সবগুলি মিলে গলিক প্রভিন্সেস বলতে এখানে। Once broken through, the door was not closed until the defeat of the Huns at this place called Shalot-sur-Marne in 451. In 451 এর ডিফিটটা একটা জায়গার নাম আছে। Once broken through, the door was not closed again until the defeat of the Huns at Shalot-sur-Marne in 451. After that, reconstruction was fairly rapid. দ্রুত দেশের সীমান্ত গড়ে উঠল। Merovingian Gaul re-established the Rhine frontier, and it was soon shifted well to the east. The Carolingians maintained it far beyond the river, and imposing their authority over the whole of Germany and pressing as far as Hungary, then under the Avars. আরেকটা গোষ্ঠীর নাম হচ্ছে আবার গোষ্ঠী। এদের মতো অথবা বলা যেতে পারে এরা একটা দুর্দর্শ বংশধর, তাদের সাথে রাশিয়ান নগরের মধ্যে পড়বে। তার মানে বোঝায় দুটো ঘটনা। The Merovingians consolidated the present-day France area. The Carolingians expanded it further east. তারা রাইন অতিক্রম করে অন্য জায়গা দখল করেছে। তার মানে it was they were building a new empire, encompassing not only France but also Germany. And this would be the empire Charlemagne would inherit, and he will say that I am the emperor of all of this. Then later on his children, grandchildren will be divided. Western Francia would be today's France. In the south, a dangerous frontier was created by the first successes of the Muslim conquest. Europe's bad no আসতেছে। Bad no তো বোঝেন নিশ্চয়ই। What is your bad no?
East.
And either Sarah, the Muslims are the bad no of the French. তাদের black হচ্ছে চেহারাই। এই ভদ্রলোকের ভাষা দেখেন, he is a so learned a man. উনি বলছেন, in the south, a dangerous frontier was created by the first successes of the Muslims conquest. All the more so because of successive defections by North Africa, hitherto Christian. আপনি জানেন তিউনিসিয়া, আলজেরিয়া, মরক্কো অঞ্চলের লোকেরা হয় বারবারিয়ান বেদুইন ছিল অথবা সভ্যরা খ্রিস্টান ছিল। এই খ্রিস্টানগুলি আবার মুসলমান হয়ে যাচ্ছে। এইটাকে এরা বলছে ডিফেকশন। ডিফেকশন মানে কি? আরবিতে বলে রিদ্দা। এখন মুরতাদ হয়ে গেছে, অর্থাৎ খ্রিস্ট ধর্মের মুরতাদরা মুসলমান হয়েছে। এরপরে বাই স্পেন এন্ড দেন বাই সিসিলি, অর্থাৎ মুসলমানরা নর্থ আফ্রিকা জয় করেছে, স্পেন জয় করেছে এবং দক্ষিণে আমি আপনাদের আগে বলেছি সিসিলি জয় করেছে। ইন দ্য ওয়েস্ট the Mediterranean became a Muslim lake. By Spain and then by Sicily. In the west, এটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ কথা, the Mediterranean became a Muslim lake. এটা কে বলেছে জানেন? এই লোক তারপরে কি মুসলিম লেক। উনি কি বলতে জানেন? ওনার একটা বই আছে, নাম কি? মোহাম্মদ এন্ড শার্লমাইন। বইয়ের নাম হচ্ছে মোহাম্মদ এন্ড শার্লমাইন। আরব দেশে মোহাম্মদের সাম্রাজ্য এবং এখানে উনি এখানে বলছেন the Mediterranean became so exclusively a Muslim lake that the Christians of Europe could not float a simple plank. The first effective reaction against this was the establishment of AB cavalry, which gave Charles Martel his victory as Poitiers in 732. Cavalry তো বুঝে পড়াটা যেমন বুঝে, তাই না? এর কি শব্দ বলেন তো? ক্যাভাল ল্যাটিন, ফ্রেঞ্চ শব্দ কি? শোভাল। শোভাল। এই জন্য ফরাসিতে নাইটকে কি বলে? শোভালিয়ে। এই যে ক্যাভাল থেকে তৈরি হয়েছে ক্যাভালরি, শিভালরি। এখন শিভালরি বলে ইংরেজিতে লেডিস ফার্স্ট। এটা কি? শিভালরি। কোন পুরুষ মানুষ একটা নারীকে দান করে রেখে বসবে না, এটার নাম কি? শিভালরি। অর্থাৎ নাইট সুলভ আচরণ করতে হবে। ভদ্রলোক কখনো ভদ্র মহিলাকে সিট ছেড়ে না দিয়ে নিজে বসে পড়ে না। আজকে তো কোনো শিভালরি নেই, আসলে কাপুরুষের যুগে এসে পড়েছি আমরা, তাই না? তো এটা শিভালরির অনেক বেশি খারাপ, কিন্তু এটা ভালো জিনিস। এই তাদের ফরাসি নাম এর লেটিন হচ্ছে ক্যাভাল, এই জন্য বাহিনীকে ক্যাভালরি বলে। ইন ওয়ান ওয়ার্ড, আমরা সম্রাট বাবর কি করে দিল্লিতে ক্ষমতা দখল করেছিলেন? তিনি কামান নিয়ে আসছিলেন, কিন্তু আরবরাও ঘোড়া চড়ে, এরাও ঘোড়া চড়ে, কিন্তু এদের ঘোড়ো শহর বাহিনীর কার মাধ্যমে আরব তারা পরাজিত করেছিল। দি ডেট ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট ফ্রান্সের ইতিহাসে। লোকের নাম, জায়গার নাম কি? পোয়াতিয়ে। লোকের নাম কি? শার্ল মার্টেল। আর হচ্ছে এখনো ফ্রান্সের লোকেরা একটা বলতে পারে না যে আরবদের আমরা পরাজিত করেছিলাম। So how can history change? History does not change too much. So people know Eiffel Tower or Suez Canal কাটে, কিন্তু মানুষের মনের মধ্যে কোনো কিছু পরিবর্তন হয় না। Same barbarism, but it takes new clothes. The result of that victory was the immense but short-lived triumph of the Carolingians. এটা যে ক্যারোলিঞ্জিয়ান বংশের উৎপত্তির আসল ঘটনা 732 753 পরে মেরোভিঞ্জিয়ান একদম চলে যায়, কারণ কি ক্যারোলিঞ্জিয়ানরা ছিল সেনাপতি আর রাজা ছিল মেরোভিঞ্জিয়ান। Who was Charles Martel? He was a general, not a king of the another king. যেহেতু সে যুদ্ধে বিজয়ী নেতৃত্ব হয়েছে, তারপর তার বংশের আশ্রমতে আসে শেষ পর্যন্ত। তখন আমরা ওই ফেমাস ক্লোভিস পাই, whose influence was felt beyond the Rhine as far as Saxony and Hungary. পূর্ব ইউরোপের স্যাক্সনি এবং হাঙ্গেরি, মানে অর্থাৎ জার্মানি এবং হাঙ্গেরি পর্যন্ত তারা তাদের সাম্রাজ্য বিস্তারিত করে। একটা যুদ্ধ যদি আপনি জেতেন, তাহলে অন্যরা আপনার ভয়ে যুদ্ধের অস্ত্র ত্যাগ করে। এই হচ্ছে কাহিনী। বা আসল কথায় আসেন, ইসলাম was a powerful neighbor and Christianity had to undertake a difficult and dramatic campaign against it, inventing its own holy war, the crusade. Crusading became interminable. Crusade কখন শুরু হলো? The first crusade, not obviously the first war against Islam. ইসলাম যুদ্ধে তারা প্রথমে যুদ্ধ করতে, ইসলাম গিয়ে ইউরোপে আক্রমণ করত। ইসলাম মানে মুসলিম শক্তি, এইটার নাম ক্রুসেড নয়। ইউরোপেরা বললো কি, আসো আমরা প্যালেস্টাইন যাই, মুসলমানদের কাছে প্যালেস্টাইন ফেরে, জেরুজালেম ফেরে। Crusading became interminable. The first crusade was not the first war against Islam. It was more. It was first collective, self-conscious and spectacular. ওই যে জাট লাগা শব্দটা অনসাইড ন, ক্রুসেড থেকে এই শব্দটা আসছে। ইন ইউর লাগেজ, আপনার পিছনে লরি বাহিনী যাবে, অথরাইজ সেটা কি ওয়াজ লঞ্চড ইন 1095। এইটা কত 395, এখান থেকে আসেন 1095। কোন সেঞ্চুরি এটা? 11th সেঞ্চুরি। প্রথম ক্রুসেড অর্গানাইজ করা হলো ইউরোপ থেকে, ফ্রান্সের রাজার নেতৃত্বে সব ইউরোপ গিয়ে আসবে। এই জন্য এখনো আমরা ফিরিঙ্গি কথাটা ব্যবহার করি। ফিরিঙ্গি মানে ফ্রান্স, আরবিতে বলে ফিরিঙ্গি, এটা বাংলায় ফিরিঙ্গি হয়েছে। ইউরোপীয় লোক মাত্রকে ফিরিঙ্গি বলা হয়, আসল অর্থ হচ্ছে ফ্রান্সের লোক। ফ্রান্স became natural leader of Europe in the attack against Middle East. এইটা হচ্ছে প্রথম ক্রুসেড। 1095 তে শুরু হলো। এটা কত বছর ধরে চলেছিল? 1095 1195, 1295 পর্যন্ত যায় নাই, 1200 মাঝখানে এসে থামছে। এখানে প্রায় 200 বছর ক্রুসেড চলেছে। এই এখন আবার শুরু হয়েছে ক্রুসেড, বাই দ্য ওয়ে। এই জন্য ক্রুসেড শুরু হয়েছে, আপনি জানেন না, কিন্তু কাজী মাফরুয়া আপনার মাথা কিন্তু গোটা উঠে গেছে। ইয়া ইটস এ ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ। আপনি জানেন না কেন আপনি এটা পড়তেছেন, কিন্তু আপনার পূর্ব নারীরা এটা পড়েছে কিনা আমার সন্দেহ, আপনার দিদিমা বা মা পড়েছে কিনা আমার সন্দেহ। কিন্তু এটা কিভাবে আসলো, এই কাহিনীটা দিয়ে শেষ করি। বলছে, the last, which was by no means the end of the struggle, was Saint Louis expedition to Tunisia in 1270. এখানে এইটা কত দেখেন, 1095 থেকে 1270, এই হচ্ছে আপনার এই 200 বছরের মতো ক্রুসেড চলেছে। আচ্ছা, এখন ক্রুসেড থেকে আমরা যেখানে যাব সেটা হলো এই আরো একটা গেট আছে। ইজিপ্ট তখন 1291 লড়াই চলেছে। ইজিপ্ট তখন গিয়ে 1291 তে একটা শহর আছে, এটা সিরিয়ার উপকূলে, একল বলে এটাকে, ওই শহরটা দখল করেছে তখন ইউরোপের ওখানে গিয়ে করে জানেন, এখন যে ইসরায়েল রাষ্ট্র করছে, এরকম তারা কয়েকটি রাষ্ট্র তৈরি করেছিল, এটার নাম ক্রুসেডার স্টেট। They captured Middle East, but they were finally defeated by Egypt in 1291. In 1291 put an end to these great eastern adventures. The appeal of crusading continued to trouble and excite emotions in the West. এই শব্দটা হচ্ছে ফুরিয়ার, ইমোশনস। শুধু একটা শব্দের অনুবাদ একটা শব্দ দিয়ে হবে না, আপনাদের কনটেক্সটে লাগবে। It is still exciting emotions in the West, আর কি, leading to unexpected upsurges in the 15th and 16th centuries. In the 17th century again, there were the lonely crusaders. অনেক লোক একলা যেত ক্রুসেড করে আরবদের মারে ফেলতো। এখন আরবরা এই লোনলি ক্রুসেড করতে গিয়ে ট্রাক চাপা দিচ্ছে নিচে গিয়ে, এটার নাম টেরোরিজম, as they were called by Alphonse Ducrot, an historian who has traced as far as the 19th century this obsessive mystique. It can even be detected as an element in the last days of colonialism. আরো আছে, আমি এখানে শেষ করলাম। the European colonialism was partly a revenge of the Arab attempt to conquer Europe. আলজেরিয়াকে দখল করলো 1830 থেকে, তিউনিসিয়াকে দখল করলো, মরক্কোকে দখল করলো। থ্যাংক ইউ।